On the back of a 0-5 start from Melbourne and West Coast, thought now would be a good time to look at the worst teams in AFL history. Key words there are AFL history, which means we'll be looking back from 1990, which is where the AFL was formed from the VFL, all the way to 2024. I know there was some winless seasons during the VFL era, so if you want me to do the worst teams in VFL history, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video of that. But otherwise, let's get into this video. Let's begin by going all the way back to 1993 with the Sydney Swans. The early 90s was a tough time for Sydney Swans. They were just struggling on-field and off-field. Crowds were under 10,000 between 1990 and 1994, and they were just not winning games. They were just winning wooden spoons instead. But especially the 1993 season, it was at all-time low for the Swans. After 18 straight losses, dating from the 1992 season all the way to round 4 of 1993, coach Gary Buckenara was sacked and he was eventually replaced by legendary coach Ron Barassi. It was just a horrible start for Sydney, just a lot of terrible losses, a couple 100-point thrashings, 124-point loss against North Melbourne, and a 162-point loss to the Brisbane Bears, where they kicked 219 points in that game. But their first win came in round 13 against Melbourne at the SCG, where they won by 40 points with Ron Barassi's first win as Sydney coach. But unfortunately, that's the only win he'd got in 1993, as the Sydney Swans finished with just one win in this season, with a percentage of 63.32% in 20 games they played. There were 22 rounds that season, but they did have a bye a couple of times this season, so they only ended up playing 20 games. It was a horrid season for Sydney, and it just was a bad period for them. But there was light at the end of the tunnel for the Swans in the future, as they did gradually improve in 1994 and 1995. They eventually get some really good players, including Tony Lockett going there in 1995. And in 1996, they actually made a grand final. So it just shows that you can improve after some really bad seasons. The second team we're going to look at is the 1996 Fitzroy side. Fitzroy were on the brink of collapse in 1996 as they were struggling on field and also off the field, trying to pay off debts that they've had over the years, which they did not have the money for. And there were actual talks that Fitzroy would actually collapse during mid-season, but the AFL were able to help them pay it out so they can play out for the rest of the 1996 season. On the field, they had a new coach in Mick Noonan, who was trying to assemble a new game plan to really get Fitzroy up and about after a 2-win 1995 season, which was coached by Bernie Quinlan. But unfortunately, the lack of talent in this Fitzroy team made it hard for Fitzroy to really be competitive for most games, where they had a lot of smashings at the start of the season, especially at round 5 when they actually lost by 109 points to the Brisbane Bears, who they actually eventually merged into the Brisbane Lions. Their first win came in round 8 against Fremantle at Western Oval, where they won by 31 points. And the player in Anthony Mellington kicked 6 goals in this game to help Fitzroy get their first win, and unfortunately their only win of the 1996 season. With all the talks of happening in the background whether Fitzroy will stay, it just made it hard for the coaches and the players to really stay focused and get the job done on the field, because unfortunately the week after their win, they actually lost by 105 points against North Melbourne. There was talks of potentially North Melbourne and Fitzroy merging, but that didn't end up going ahead. So instead, it ended up being the Brisbane Bears and Fitzroy combining to be the Brisbane Lions. And when this happened and confirmed after round 13, coach Michael Noonan realised that his club was definitely finished, so he thought it was a good time to resign and was replaced by Alan McConnell, who was one of the caretaker coaches from last season after Bernie Quinlan was sacked. Didn't really help the on-field results, as they still lost pretty much every game for the rest of the Fitzroy's 1996 season, including a 151-point smashing in their last ever game in Melbourne, and then an 86-point loss against the team they did beat early in the season, Fremantle, in Perth, as that was their last ever game that Fitzroy ever played in the AFL. So they ended up winning only one game and lost 21 games with a percentage of under 50%, 49.47%, which is one of the lowest in AFL history. And the third and final team that we're going to look at is the GWS's 2013 season. Now I know it's a little bit harsh given that this was a very young side, only the second year in their competition, and there was a lot of players that still needed to develop and really adapt to AFL football. But we have to put them on here because they only won one game themselves. They had 5 100-point plus smashings, and they had a lot of big margin losses. Only one that was a very memorable loss, if you want to call it that way, was in round 15 against the Western Bulldogs, when they only lost by 4 points. and their only win came at the Giants Stadium in round 19. They had to wait. So this is in early August in 2013, where they beat Melbourne. Same thing for Sydney. They won by 37 points to get their first and only win of that season. Now, they finished with 1 win and 21 losses with a percentage of 50.97% and nearly conceding 3,000 points on the way through too. However, still not the lowest in AFL history, as we've just shown before. It was a very difficult season for the Giants, but as I said before, it was their second season in the competition. And don't feel too bad, because a lot of these players that were in this side have all become really good AFL players. You had the co-captains at this time, Callum Ward and Phil Davis. They had good careers, whereas Callum Ward is still playing. And then you got great players right now, as in Toby Green, who's their current Giants captain, who is an All-Australian player, an All-Australian captain. You got Jeremy Cameron, one of the best forwards in the game. And then some good players over their careers in Stephen Coniglio, Dylan Shield, Lockie Whitfield, Devon Smith, Taylor Adams, just to name a few. And also Adam Treloar, can't forget him too, just to name a few. So it wasn't that bad for the Giants, as they did develop, and now they've become a really good side over the last, I'd say, 5-6 years in a way. And they did make a grand final in 2019. So there are the 3 teams in AFL history that have only won 1 game in a whole home and away season. There are quite a few that have only won 2 games. You've gone from Fitzroy 1995, Fremantle 2001, you've got Carlton's 2018 season, and then you've also got in 2022, you've got the North Melbourne and West Coast both having 2-win seasons as well. So there is a little bit of a list of that, and also Richmond's 2024 season was only 2 wins, so it was quite a few of them, but we thought we would go with the worst seasons, and it was those 3 teams. Do I think any team in 2025 is only going to win 1 game this season? Time will tell, but I don't think that will happen. Melbourne most certainly will be fine. I think they just had a bad start, but they definitely won't only get 1 win. They'll definitely get more wins. West Coast is one that I think a lot of people are saying that they're going to go winless. I don't agree with that. I think they will get a couple of wins. They do play in Perth, which is a tough place to win. Even if it's against West Coast, it's been tough, as I've said, for West Coast and Melbourne. But how do they go in a simulation of the 2025 season? Do they do better than what they've done now? If you click this video here, I've simulated the whole 2025 season with some surprising results.